academic achievement gives the following impression that educated politicians are perceived to be in a better position to govern, and that the level of education among politicians reflects the importance society attaches to education, and that educated politicians may be able to encourage the masses to embrace education. And educated politicians are likely to be progressive in their views, values, and politics.
Education refines you. It's just like a rough diamond that has to go through the fire and become smooth and more glittery. So education does that to a human personality. It will tone him down. He'll use more brains than bronze.
Definitely, if there's no education, then they're not going to reach anything in life, and it's very important to succeed in life.
Yeah, I'm really congratulating Julius Malema. I think it's a good thing that you have education, because of education is the key. And with education, it's better than having nothing, you see. So via his perspective of approaching things, is going to be better.
And the big question is, can great leadership only be linked to education? And we open the lines on 011-542-2186, the value that we place on education, this being an avenue or vehicle that can lead to greater prospects in life. Give us a call on 011-542-2186, or you can join us on social media as we congratulate the CIC of the EFF, Julius Malema, on his latest achievement. Joining us in studio is Jackie Shandu, political commentator. Lufuno Gogoro is a former Economic Freedom Fighter member. Kim Heller is a political commentator. And good evening to all our guests, and thanks so much for joining us. My ladyship, we'll start with you. Congratulations are in order for the CIC.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Cindy. I would personally like to congratulate Julius Malema on the obtaining of his honours degree, which I think is a sterling achievement. It's a huge accolade that I think we should all be celebrating, irrespective of our political affiliation or our view on him personally. I had the great privilege to work with him, as you are aware, in the leadership of the EFF. And I can say unequivocally that he's a very, very smart man. And yet we've allowed the media, particularly the white media, to define him as a fool, to ridicule his intellectual capacity. And that's very problematic. It's the very same media that with our own President Zuma, they undermine his lack of educational qualifications.
Or formal education. And as you were saying, I think maybe in recent years, especially with Julius Malema having gone for higher education and training, that perception may have shifted. But as you rightfully say, before then it was, his matric certificate or his results, that he had an F in woodwork, etc. The exemplary role that he's now played in terms of inspiring young people to also acquire further education, that in itself cannot be overstated.
No, absolutely correct. In fact, I must also begin by saying very warm congratulations to the EFF president. And it goes a long way in terms of motivating, in terms of inspiring young people. Of course, we also approach education from the black radical perspective of people like, for instance, Robert Sobukwe, who says, for us, education means being of service to Africa, okay? It does not go by extension that if you are educated, right? And that's why we can even make examples of quite highly educated people like the former President Thabo Mbeki, who proved with all his English-based education to be a monumental disaster for the economic aspirations of the black majority in South Africa.
Okay, but that is a view that you hold. Some might argue that, he was instrumental in establishing a monetary framework that is appealing, to investors, etc. But coming back to whether formal education is that conduit that leads to great leadership.
So, Cindy, I think to pick up on the point I was making a little bit earlier, we have President Zuma, who was never able to pursue his own educational ambitions because he put the interest of the struggle and our people first. And by so doing, sacrificed his own academic and educational dreams. And what we see is someone like the president pushing in his own capacity, his personal capacity, education for everyone in this nation, as well as he's a very strong advocate of free education. Yet those are stories that we don't see very much in the media. I think in South Africa, we need to be very careful to equate what we call clever blacks with those that have actually been able to receive formal education, because it shows no cognizance of the historical and contemporary opportunity landscape, which has kept most black African people out of the educational forum. They remain on the sidelines. And then I think I would like to say that as we celebrate the achievements of Julius Malema tonight, we should also not forget that there are hundreds of thousands of black African children who cannot even enter university, and therefore the necessity to boost the Fees Must Fall drive.
Yeah, but education, as you put it, that it also has the potential of being elitist, as you're saying, that some may not have acquired the same achievements or accolades as you had, and therefore may feel distant or that they don't resonate with what your message is. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. I mean, it's interesting that Julius Malema graduates at a time where there is this campaign, this movement of fees must fall. And part of its demand is the decolonization of the education system, including the curriculum, because the university, as we know it in post-1994 South Africa, is still largely in tune with Western values. And so the educational accomplishments of the vast majority of black people, unfortunately, more often than not, it becomes a bridge to move away from, black people and their interests, and suddenly, now entertain views that are very much in tune with what we understand to be colonial education. So it remains to be seen if certain academic accomplishments will translate into genuine and committed service to the black majority in South Africa.
All right, so that education doesn't make you a stranger to the aspirations and cause of the people. Ibrahim and Soweto, good evening to you and thanks for calling.
Hi, good evening, Cindy. Good evening to your panelists as well.
Mm-hmm. What's your question or comment? Congratulatory message, I'm sure.
Well, precisely, but also I like what you call that gentleman Jake Kishandu is saying. He's quite correct, and I agree with him. Sometimes, education is very important. We've seen a lot of black academics out there. Unfortunately, some of them, they haven't been televised as Mr. Malema has been televised today. But nevertheless, we congratulate the man. Well done for him, and we're hoping that we'll get more black academics coming through. But it necessarily doesn't say that now that you have obtained education, now you become a better leader. It absolutely doesn't say that. Of course, you might qualify whatever you have, what you call studied for, but it does not make you a better leader. Mr. Jackie Chan is a typical example of the former president, Mr. Thabo Mbeki. We know that happened during his tenure as the president, that actually to this day, as we are fighting for radical economic transformation today, that the educated president, or beloved education, educated president, the former comrade Thabo Mbeki, he failed to implement the resolution or the implementation of that was going to obviously uplift the lives of black people in this country, being educated as it were. So, education is a fine thing. We congratulate those that go to school, and we want our people to obtain education. But it cannot be said that education now is now the thing that makes a leader.
All right, Ibrahim, thank you so much. Really appreciate your call. Sandile in the Eastern Cape, good evening to you. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Cindy. Thank you very much for having me. I would really like to congratulate Malema for job well done. I'm coming from a Transkei area, and I strongly believe that this kind of achievement will likely encourage many poor people, especially from the Transkei area. So I would like to really extend my message of congratulations to him. But I'd like also to commend you for calling the gentleman into order by raising the issue of Thabo Mbeki and monumental disaster. I think I would like to commend you. We are celebrating a success, and I think you must stick to that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it's not that kind of PhD, hey, a pull him down syndrome. But Kim, just coming back to how we view Julius Malema now, or many other leaders who may or may not conform based on their education and then neglect the mandate of the true revolution or the liberation of the people?
Cindy, I must say I find the argument that you can't be educated and be a revolutionary leader quite incompatible. And I think there's also what I would call fake media circulating. You know, both Jackie and I have been in the EFF, and we can both argue that you find a quality of leadership, a brilliance, intellectual brilliance, strategic brilliance within both the leadership itself and within the ranks of the ordinary members. So I think we shouldn't see that there's going to be a schism or an alienation of the Malema from his followers as he advances educationally. I think rather what is going to separate him from his leadership and the rank and file is what I would call his rather unintelligent politics at the moment, which is seeing him vest his support with a party like the DA and with white interests. So I think what is going to distance him is the pursuit of a white agenda in this country rather than a black agenda, certainly not his advance towards academic excellence.
Yeah, so maybe the choice of going in bed with the DA and that kind of thing could cast doubt, from members whether it's still on that trajectory of a true revolutionary party. But let's take another caller. Joseph in Welkom. Good evening to you. Thanks for calling.
Hello, Cindy. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Man, the fine self. I would like to congratulate the chief in commanders for making the youth to look up to him.
We're listening.
That education is very important as a vehicle to get you anywhere. Congratulations to the chief commander.
Nkosi, we'll just take that on his behalf. Nkosi kakhulu, Joseph. And Benzi in Mpumalanga, good evening to you.
Yes, good evening, ma'am. How are you?
I'm well, how are you?
Good, thank you. Greetings to your panel. Sister Cindy, education remains an ultimate equalizer. And it is very, very heartening for Mr. Malema to have gone through these journeys despite all the challenges that he faced throughout his life. He has become a beacon of hope, and he has reaffirmed the conviction that the education will liberate this country. It will liberate all children from poor families. Thank you very much.
Nkosi kakhulu Benzi. Bongani in Soweto, good evening to you. All right, we lost Bongani there. Oh, hi. Hi, Bongani.
Cindy, I will comment in this manner here. There are two types of education. This one of Malema, it's a Western-dominated Christian education. And according to me, it's opposed to African indigenous knowledge systems. Now, if the degree Malema is having is going to change his behavioral pattern, I'm going to clap hands for him. But the way I understand it, education is in fact indoctrination. It means you are shaping a person to think in a certain direction and not the other direction. The way I see this Western Christian education is designed to water down the African indigenous knowledge system. A person can be educated and be shaped to think in a certain direction, but along the line, as Africans, we need to reshape our people towards the African indigenous knowledge system.
Bongani, I couldn't agree with you more, but in the current modern society that these two would have to coincide, because you cannot necessarily relinquish the one in favor of the other in the global world where English is a universal language and so forth. That yes, there are certain compromises that were made, and that would be the African indigenous knowledge and wisdom. But coming back to politics and the leadership or level of quality, therefore, that thereof, Malema's dissertation was part, studying Afrikaans and, how that is a conduit to white supremacy, to better understand perhaps how we can then turn this, the democracy around to benefit the masses. What is your view?
No, correct. It's a pertinent study to get into, particularly around the climate of fees must fall and decolonization. But we must, once and for all, debunk the myth that education, particularly in its neo-colonial capitalist form, as our universities are structured, automatically translates into liberation. And we must look at our own history as a country. We have a long history of highly educated PhDs throughout the continent, and that has not translated. So education must be within the context of the struggle for liberation, and that we have to prioritize the politics of land, the politics of transformation of the economy, which will ultimately enable us to transform the education system and put it in tune with the African personality.
Yeah, I mean, I was just coming back to that conformity that comes with the Western or colonialized education, that if all the professionals, many whom have a very embarrassing bank balance, for lack of a better phrase, and not being able to create our own economies, our own industries, our own health sector, overly reliant on government, and yet be sitting with a very large population of highly educated people. Is that sort of a disjuncture, if you will, in what education is supposed to do as an equalizer or even a liberating a tool?
Yes, I think your point is valid. I think people have embraced education for themselves and left their people behind, and that is not the essence of true or revolutionary leadership. I'd like to pick up on a point that Jackie made, which I agree with very strongly. The issue of decolonization is very important, and until we decolonize our education remains captive in a white monopoly capital domain. And, I think that we have African people in this country who dress in these gowns. I mean, one of the images that I find quite concerning is, Malema in this traditional, European gown. And I think we have to look at those contradictions, because we need to make education our own, and it's currently not our own.
Sure.
So we're working on an educational system that has never honored the black child in this country, that has forced him and her into a system of westernized white education. And I think we need to continually question that, because I think it is that very essence that allows professionals to distance themselves from the community rather than go back and contribute as active citizens of their own communities.
Yeah, but it's still necessary in order for you to navigate your world and be able to at least have some semblance of a decent life. But I quickly want to take a caller. Sihle in Soweto, good evening to you, and thanks for calling.
Good evening, Cindy, and good evening to your panel as well. Congratulations to Julius Malema for acquiring and achieving the academic qualification. My view is that there is still more that Julius needs to be working on. Number one, in my view, he is lacking on soft skills. Number two, he has also to improve his emotional intelligence. Why I'm saying that, you look at how he conducts himself there in Parliament. As a leader, you must master your emotions. You mustn't allow your emotions to overtake, your reasoning. So those are some of the things that he needs to work on. And thirdly, a good leader, in my view, is a leader that surrounds himself or herself with people that surpasses him or her. That is my contribution to...
Really appreciate it, Sihle. Well, he does have Dr. Ndlozi now. I suppose he has somebody to aspire to. We have Michael in Mpumalanga. Good evening to you.
Yes, good evening. How are you, man?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. How are you?
Yes, I'm okay, man.
Okay. What's your comment or question?
I just want to congratulate Malema. I say thanks for showing that we as black, we can go as far as he's going. But the problem with Julius Malema is that he's not behaving in a manner that when he's on a TV, on a parliament, he's behaved like a, I don't know, maybe it's like a donkey or whatsoever.
Donkey.
Okay, sorry for that. But he must show us that he is a leader. If he is a leader, he must show us where does he come from. Now he's got a degree of in a philosophy, but he must show us, even in a parliament, that our children that is still growing, they must follow on his footsteps, not to be rude to other people, like all people. He must respect all people.
Thank you so much, Michael. I think that was the argument, what Bongane was saying about your African customs practices, general respect for the elderly, etc. Whether he will change his persona, is he required to do so, or can the personality and the robustness and all of that still retain or maintain, even with the education that is just acquired?
You know what is interesting is that the EFF characterizes itself as a Marxist, Leninist, Fanonian formation. I mean, Kim would know. And when you speak of Fanon, you speak of one of the most authoritative activists, revolutionaries, and scholars on decolonization. And in one of his major works, Black Skin, White Masks, he writes about the dangers also of just uncritically, sort of internalizing Western indoctrination, which comes as education, particularly from the university. So we hope, knowing Julius, that his critical consciousness will not be swallowed by, the credentialization, the certification, and, this association now with the learned and more often than not in our context, which is essentially westernization, and will remain true to the African personality, the South African problem that faces black people through our own experience.
Yeah, I mean, Sihle was talking about the tonality and almost, having those soft skills, being able to discern when to react in a particular manner, even when you do, not to take it outside the decency realm, if you want to call it that, because we've seen Malema hurling insults at the likes of Tutumieni, Nomvola Mukonyana, suggesting very serious allegations of indiscretion. So do you think that is what would make him a great leader as opposed to being just a good leader?
Well, I think what would make him a great leader is to pursue the black agenda.
Correct.
And education is a very key part of the black agenda. I think it's more about antics in parliament and disruptions. It's about connecting and with the black community. And he's got a perfect opportunity now to do that through the mode of education. And hopefully he will learn a lesson from President Zuma, who behind the scenes does a lot of support of educational students. He supports a host of university students. And perhaps Malema must in his own community emulate the president by supporting young African children.
Yeah, each one teach one. That's
and perhaps in a quiet, unassuming way, rather than always being an on-show type of event. Let him do it quietly. Let him build the communities at a grassroots levels. I think that is what's going to give him authenticity and respect.
We must add, Cindy, quickly, that the theatrics, the tantrums in Parliament are becoming a huge liability. They've lost their spark and their bite, and the people are like, okay, we know this now.
It's a waste of time as well, I think, for most of us.
We hope that as he matures,
let's take a caller. Hi, Kennedy, you'll be our last caller on this. Good evening to you.
Good evening, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good.
Your comment or question, Kennedy?
It's a comment. I would like to congratulate Julius Malema for having shown that an African man can do it through perseverance. I think given what we have known in the head of Julius Malema, I think he has defied the odds for many people. But one most important thing that I would want to say regarding Julius Malema is that he has shown that through perseverance, hard work, you can make it. And that is a good thing, especially for the South African child who wants to have somebody to emulate or to model from. And here's Julius Malema, who is said to have not passed at some stage in his high school or in the primary school there, but now he has a degree, an honors degree. And that in its own, I think, is a great fit, and we need to applaud that. And it's good for our politics. It's good for our politics, particularly if we want to grow the future generation of leaders that are capable to run the country.
Oh, we certainly hail the CIC, Kennedy. Thank you so much. We appreciate our guests also coming in. Jackie Shandu, political commentator, and Kim Heller, political commentator and writer. Thanks indeed for coming through. And you at home for taking the trouble to call in. We'll take a quick ad break. We'll see you shortly.